With the best brand of football in Idaho, this is the 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That is right. Welcome back. It's another edition of the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, breaking down the 8-man game week in, week out in the state of Idaho. My name is Brandon Bainey. We are joined, as always, by the coach, Lane Kirkland. What's going on, Coach Kirkland?
Hey, guys. Must be playoff time. It's raining and getting colder. It's beautiful out there.
Yeah, that's only a complete psychopath like you would say that's beautiful weather.
T-shirt weather now.
Yeah. All right, tough guy. Well, here's another tough guy. It's the operator of the Idaho 8-Man Twitter account, Will Henneke. What's up, Will?
I'm a baseball coach, man. This rain stuff, forget that. We can't play in rain. We're soft. Wait, I mean, we need ideal playing circumstances.
That's right. Hey, where I live up in North Idaho, guys, we had snow today. So, we'll see what the playoffs have in store. But yeah, you're right, Coach Kirkland. It's like we turned the calendar here into the postseason, and all of a sudden Mother Nature kind of flipped that switch, and we got football weather now. A couple of 11-man teams went soft, and they went inside Holt Arena this week over in East Idaho. But the true teams, Coach, they play outdoors, right?
That's for sure. Yeah, you got to be a real man to play football outside.
And of course, we say that all in joking and fun, of course. All right. We know everybody wants us to get to the brackets and break down all these playoff matchups. Before we do that, I wanted to take a quick peek back to the week that was. There were a couple of really fascinating games that had some major playoff implications. We kind of knew coming into the last week of the season, what teams were in, who was feeling pretty comfortable. I'm not sure Paul Kingsbury conveyed that very clearly in what was the the muddledness of a fill-in show. I'm only kidding, of course. He did a great job filling in. You guys were awesome last week without me. I appreciate you guys carrying the ball while I was on the leave list. But I wanted to highlight a couple of games of the week. And specifically, I think our top game of the week took place in Clark Fork, where the Wampus Cats found themselves down by 20 points with 8:30 to play. Coach Kirkland, some idiot that was on the broadcast, me, said, well, looks like I'm headed to Worley for the opening round of the playoffs next week. Broke the number one rule in broadcasting. Next thing you know, Clark Fork has completed the largest comeback in school history to win 44-42. What an awesome moment for the Wampus Cats.
Yeah, that must have got that news must have got down to the sideline over there, and a little motivation provided. What a great finish with 10 seconds remaining. That's great football.
Yeah, Will, there was a lot of layers to the onion here that made this so impressive. First of all, coming into the game, Clark Fork was missing one of its most versatile players, Chase Sanroman. Had an ocular accident where he was riding bikes with his brother, and a rock kicked up and hit him in the eye. And so he wasn't available to play. So already Coach Patrick Young having to adjust the game plan. Then during the course of the game, at one point, Coach Young looks over to the sideline, and 6 of his 8 starters are all being tended to by the trainer with different injuries. Coach Young said at one point, he turned to a freshman that they have been working in on the defensive line, and he said, hey, can you play DB? And the kid's like, no, I play D end. And Coach Young's like, well, you're an athlete. Get out there and figure it out. We need a body. I mean, it was impressive just dealing with all the injuries too, Will.
I was talking to a different coach earlier this week, and he said this time of year, you're never truly healthy. You're in survival mode. Who has the healthiest lineup, who has the healthiest bodies. And for Clark Fork to overcome all those injuries against, a pretty decent Lakeside team, to be able to come back and get that win and, do it in the final minutes, have that big comeback. That's a pretty big statement for that program.
Yeah. So Ethan Howard throws for 246 yards and 5 touchdowns in the comeback. 4 of those came in the fourth quarter as they were trying to rally. Coach Kirkland, have you ever looked over at the sideline in a game that you've coached and have seen 6 of your 8 starters all out with injury?
I've had 5 starters out before in 2017 against Dietrich, and that was tough going. we threw everything at them that we could, including the freshmen and the managers. So whatever works, man.
Yep.
You have to adapt for sure. And the other part that I thought was really impressive is I talked to Coach Young pregame for Clark Fork, and he said, yeah, we want to run the ball. We know they're physical. We like to think we're pretty physical. It's going to be smash mouth football. We want to run the ball. Well, you get down 20 with 8 minutes to go. That game plan goes out the window. They switched to almost exclusively passing, and Ethan Howard, senior quarterback, was one of the guys that was banged up, and you could tell. He was giving it everything he had. The center for Clark Fork is having teammates yank on his shoulder after every play, coach, trying to get that shoulder pop back into place. It was like a mash unit with Clark Fork. What does it say about the coaching staff that they were able to adjust the game plan to go from almost running 100% of the time to passing 100% of the time, and they were able to pull it off? That's not an easy switch to do midweek when you've prepared for a different type of game plan.
For sure. Obviously somewhere down the line, someone was able to play catch with one another before that game. And it just seemed like it worked in that particular game for him. And sometimes luck falls your way, but you prepare for it along the way here and there. And you hope that you get a chance to be able to call those passes and the guy catch it. So way to go.
For sure. So that's our game of the week, the most exciting game. And it also happened to have the biggest playoff implications, where the winner literally got to go to the playoffs and the loser did not. Clark Fork wins 44-42. Game tying touchdown comes with 10 seconds left. Ethan Howard finds the freshman Cameron Stewart, and then Cole Mintkin, who was on the offensive line to start the year. Now he's playing running back, complete still with jersey number 52, running the rock for Clark Fork. He runs in the 2-point conversion, and Clark Fork survives 44-42. And we'll get to their first round matchup here in a moment. Honorable mention game of the week, though, Will, takes us to District 5-6, also in the 1A D2 ranks. We talked about coming into the final week where there was the possibility of a 3-way tie for second place and that second and final playoff berth between North Gem, Mackay, and Water Springs, with all three hypothetically beating each other. And that's exactly how it played out. North Gem beat Mackay. Mackay beat Water Springs. Water Springs beat North Gem. So what it all came down to was a point differential. Now, they all lost by the maximum to Rockland. They all won by the maximum against Clark County. So really it came down to, okay, when these three teams played head to head, how did it shake out? And we saw that coming in, Mackay needed to win by 7 or more to get that second playoff spot, Will, and they won by 8. What a job by Mackay.
Isn't that wild to think about how an entire season, it comes down to the second half where, let's just say you're Water Springs for a second, and I'm not saying this to pick on them at all, but at what point in that second half did their coaches say, if we just would have gotten like one more touchdown somewhere along the line, maybe we're not in this mess, or North Gem, Corey Hatch and his kids, man, if we would have gotten a couple of 2-point conversions somewhere along the line, maybe we're not in this mess. It's crazy to think that a season where, you're doing camps and you're doing workouts and you're doing drills all summer up until kickoff right around Labor Day. And here we are at the end of October talking about 2 points being the difference that put Mackay into the playoffs.
Yeah, and it came down to 2 points because North Gem beat Mackay by 6, and then Water Springs beat North Gem by 6, and Mackay beats Water Springs by 8. Coach, have you ever seen a tiebreaker that razor thin before?
That's pretty thin. Games were won by inches and sometimes by extra points. So both applied. That sounds like this game.
The 2-point conversions are so critical in the 8-man game. It's not something we think about big picture, but a lot of times they do determine even strategy and how teams fall behind. For the game itself, it lived up to the hype. Mackay 28, Water Springs 20. Will, Water Springs led this game 20-6 in the first half. Corbin Nelson threw a touchdown to Nate D'Antoni. Elvin Lynn and Landon Reamer both scored rushing touchdowns for the Warriors. But then Mackay outscores Water Springs 22-0 the rest of the way, and it was with the Bruleys, Tayson and Palin. Taysom throws a 20-yard touchdown pass to Palin with 5 minutes to play in the second quarter. It's 20-14. Mackey gets the ball back, and then Taysom scores a 10-yard touchdown run to tie the game 20-20 at halftime. It stayed that way until the fourth quarter when Taysom found Palin again for what ended up being the game-winning score, and then, of course, the 2-point conversion. But, I mean, Water Springs was up 20-6 and had to have been feeling pretty good.
Yeah, when you're up 20-6, you got to feel like you're definitely in a good spot. But, Coach Kirkland, you can attest to this. 20-6 in 8-man football is not much. That's maybe 20-18 in 11-man football. That script can flip really, really quickly. It's a credit to Mackey's defense, though, to be able to shut Water Springs down, gave up some early plays, gave up some early points, but shut it down and let their offense come back and get the win.
Yeah, that was an incredible comeback for Mackey, and really impressive to see. So congratulations to the Miners for taking that second spot to the playoffs, and we'll talk about their first round opponent here in just a moment. The final game we wanted to touch on of consequence was this winner-take-all battle between Idaho City and Rimrock. Winner would get the second and final playoff berth from District 3 at the Class 1A D1 ranks. Will, second year in a row, Idaho City says, yeah, that's ours, and not particularly close. 60-20, they defeat Rimrock.
Yeah, I was surprised by the spread, in part because Idaho City struggled on offense all year, but Coach Rober and his kids, they found it on Friday and put up 60 points, and they got themselves into the playoffs. And there are some people who might have said, well, maybe you don't really want to be there because now they have to go play a really, really good Kamei team, which we'll talk about coming up. But, when you're put in one of those winner-take-all type situations, it's really hard not to go throttle down. And the Idaho City kids did that, and they got it done. They found it when it mattered most and got a big win. And
so Idaho City is kind of the big mystery team this year, where typically we're able to find at least, some stats online somewhere, or a report to the local newspaper, or even some film. Coach, I know you watch a lot of film during the season. Nothing out there for Idaho City. So I got a roster, and I'm hoping that combined with what you remember from last year, because Idaho City had to play York Carey Panthers in the first round last year. I'm hoping we can put together some sort of a profile here of Idaho City. What do you remember about this Wildcats program from last year?
I know they were really prepared. Coach Rober always prepares those guys, and they are a true family when they show up as their football team and all their fans. That's just how they live and how they function. So I think that when it's coming together, they're really stuck out the most to me. I had a couple really good ball carrier, like Brody something, seems like his name was.
Brody back. Yep.
Yeah, he graduated. He was really skilled and gave us some fits. But Coach Robert does a great job over there organizing things and getting them ready to play ball, and he certainly did again.
Yeah, so I'll tell you that they've got a couple of good seniors up front on the O-line. Dax Olvera, 5'11", 190. Mason Taylor, 6'1", 260. That always helps. And then they've got a litany of athletes that you'll recognize from other sports at Idaho City, like basketball, or I got to cover their baseball team last year, and I see so many familiar names like Tel Jewell and Trey Martini and Hayden Higgins and Jackson Erb and Jonathan Green. And I think they've got a lot of speedy, dynamic athletes. They're not like the biggest guys necessarily, but they're fleet of foot, Will, and I think that helps them in space.
Yeah, as long as they can get into space, that's the key. If you've got a strength like that, find a way to use it and find a way to exploit it. And we'll get into their matchup coming up down the here a little bit later in the podcast. But they've got a tough assignment here. But the important thing is, and it's a wise man once told me, and nobody get offended when I say this. He said, I'd rather be the ugliest girl invited to the dance than the prettiest girl left at home. And there are a lot of people who would say, oh, we could beat Idaho City. We could beat Idaho City. Well, Idaho City's in the playoffs, and I don't think that they should be ashamed of it. I don't think they should be embarrassed of it. And I think that they should go up to Kamei on Friday, and they should just let it all hang out. You want to talk about a team with literally nothing to lose? That would be the Wildcats.
Yep. And that's, I like how this transitions right into the bracket here, gentlemen. What I'm going to do is put the brackets up on the screen. And so when you're watching the video version of this on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page, you'll be able to follow along on your screen. If you're listening at IdahoSports.com or wherever you download your podcast, it's all good. We've got the state brackets right at the top of the homepage. Excuse me, there as well. So here is the 1A D1 bracket, gentlemen, and right at the top we see they seed them 1 through 8 based on the at-large, based upon the non-district champions, and then they'll get reseeded again next week. So the top non-district champion was Mackay, and they will play the number 8 seed Idaho City. Will, you kind of already set the table for it. Coach Kirkland, I feel like Mackay is a team that everybody has been sleeping on this year. They kind of had an early toe stubbing in that loss to Logos. And since then, they haven't lost. I mean, that's their only loss this year. They're 7-1. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on Mackay if that's possible.
They always seem to turn on the Jets as the playoffs approach. And in the latter half of the season, it seems like they always can continue to find themselves year after year and just get better and better and better. And you have to watch yourself. If you're going up against a Mackay team and not underestimate them from the earlier parts of the season. They always seem to get something going there. I've never been able to coach against them or play against them, but I've seen them in the bracket, and they do very well when the postseason shows up.
Will, this is a Mackay team that runs the ball really well with Connor Weddle and Colton O'Kane and Dave Clute, the quarterback. He runs the ball pretty well also. When they do go back to pass, they do pretty well. They've got a freshman and Lawson Landmark who's really turned a corner at wide receiver. But to me, the strength of this Mackay team really is its defense, led by Porter Whipple, who I think is the best defensive player in 8-man football.
He might be the best lineman in 8-man football, period, offense or defense. He's a tremendous player, but you're right in that they've played 8 games this year and they've given up less than 10 points per game. It's, their style of play. They're not an aired out team. So they've got a lot of wins that are comfortable, but they're not as eye popping as some other teams because of the style of play. They do run the ball a lot. I would expect them to be, and another thing about Mackay this time of year, you talked about the weather up there. Mackay can be a little bit tricky weather-wise as we start getting later in the year. So I'd expect them to be pretty conservative with their offense and just ride those backs and ride that offensive line. That may help Idaho City stick around. And if Idaho City can land a couple punches, they can make it interesting. But I think Mackay just has too many athletes. And I think that their defense, and you look at some of those teams that they've beaten this year, they've beaten Troy, they've beaten Potlatch, they've beaten Lapway, they've beaten some teams that can get up and down the field. They shut Potlatch out. Potlatch is averaging like 40-something points a game. So their defense, I think, is what's going to put them over the top on Friday against Idaho City.
Yeah, you mentioned the field conditions. Last year, Butte County had to go to Mackay for the quarterfinals, and Mackay won 16-12. I don't think the uniforms are still clean from that. They're still trying to get the dirt and the mud stains out. It was just a muddy, mucky mess. And where did Mackay run into trouble, Coach, last year? When they had to go inside that darn dome, Holt Arena, for the semifinals. They had stayed outside, I think they would have been okay.
Yeah, there could have been a chance there.
Yep. So I think we all.
Coach, is he playing an electric piano there?
It sounds like he's going off pretty good there.
Oh, man.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. My internet hit a rolling blackout, as it were, up here. So anyways, I was talking about Idaho City's loose. They have no pressure, but we all like Mackay in this first matchup. Let's go to the next one here. The number 2 seed, at least for this round, is Grace. They will play the number 7 seed, Cary. This is just what you wanted to see, Coach Kirkland, right? Another matchup with Grace after playing them in the season opener each of the last two years.
You bet. We need to score a touchdown against these guys, maybe 3 or 4, hopefully. It's been a couple games. That's been the joke here so far. But, Grace is a strong team. bunch of big kids, and they seem to always get it going as well in the latter half of the year, even though Kendrick took it to them. But the Carey boys had a great game in Raft River, and a plus 11 turnover margin in the last 2 games against teams, and found themselves. And I think this is going to be a good dogfight. Carey is on the road, which is an advantage, of course, to Grace, but we'll see what happens in this slugfest.
Yeah, and I should mention the dates and times for all these games. So Idaho City is at Kamei Friday night, 7 o'clock. Carey will be at Grace Friday night as well for a 6 o'clock kickoff. That game will be on IdahoSports.com. So you can tune in and listen to all of the play-by-play there between the Panthers and the Grizzlies if you can't make the trip over to Grace. Will, for Grace, they're 5-3, but their 3 losses are all to respectable quality opponents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Including last week to Butte County in what was basically the High Desert Conference Championship. Butte County came out and kind of punched him in the nose a little bit. I think that's going to get Grace refocused, and anyone that's standing in their way, I think, is going to get counterpunched here.
It's going to be really interesting to see, and the great thing is we will be able to see it by watching it on Idaho Sports on how Grace responds, because they've gotten a couple standing 8 counts the last couple of weeks. Kendrick put it on them pretty good, and then Butte County put it on them pretty good last week. Now, meanwhile, on the other side, like Coach Kirkland was talking about, Carey's kind of trending the other way. They started slow, and they've been playing much better football of late. So I think people might look at it and say, 5-3 against 3-5, and the 5-3 team already beat them by 32, 34, whatever it was in that season opener. Grace in a walk. I don't think this is a walk at all. I think this is a great matchup, and if anything, I might lean a little bit towards Carey just because I think they're playing a little bit better football right now.
Yeah, that game between Carey and Raft River was zeros for a really long time, all the way down to the last couple of minutes of the second quarter, Coach, and then boom, a rushing touchdown, and then another rushing score by Nick Versus, and then a touchdown pass from Preston Wood to AJ Black, and all of a sudden it was 20-0 Carey, like at halftime. In the blink of an eye, that's how quickly it turned. You tell me if I'm wrong here, Coach, but I think Carey really turned the corner when Nick Versus finally was back on the field and healthy.
Yeah, they really found themselves this last game and began to capitalize on turnovers. 4 interceptions and 2 fumble recoveries, and capitalizing on those early to kind of get a 20-0 lead there, and then continue to roll the second half. It's going to give them a lot of confidence to know they can put points on the board now, and take that over to the Grizzlies and see what happens. The guys we're wanting to know is Paul broadcasting that game?
No, so it's actually going to be one of our East Idaho broadcasters, Joel Richardson. Paul is going to be actually on the call of another game we're going to talk about next. Actually, you know what? He got switched. He was going to do the Murtaugh Lighthouse game, but he's going to do only 11-man football this week, Coach. So.
Yeah. He had made a comment about hamburgers being good in Carey and the football being bad, and that's all I heard the rest of the week in my room as players coming in. Who is that guy? What's he talking about?
People are watching. People are watching.
Yeah, and the fans at Raft River came over and said they're already sold out of hamburgers at Raft River, and we're playing good football, Coach. So, yeah, it was hamburgers all week.
Oh, that's funny. We have a lot of fun with the fan bases. Anything we say is always, we love to be wrong is the number one rule here. When we make our predictions. Last year, Clearwater Valley played at Raft River in the quarterfinals, and on the 8-man Prepcast, I predicted a Clearwater Valley win, and I showed up at Raft River to broadcast that game, and after Raft River took it to the Rams, the fans sure let me know how wrong I was. So I'm glad to wear it when I'm wrong. But yeah, Paul, I thought was maybe a little over the line with that comment. That was pretty harsh last week, I thought. But
motivation, all they called it.
That's right. I think this game really comes down to the trenches. Nick Versus and company and AJ Black versus Kai and Joe Clegg. I think that whoever can control the trenches in this game and establish their dominance up front is going to be the team that has the most success, because both these teams are pretty similar actually in what they want to do. So I think it's going to be a really fun game. Carey at Grace Friday, 6 o'clock on IdahoSports.com. I will note it is an audio broadcast, so you can tune in and listen to Joel paint the picture of what's going to happen, but that's going to be great. as well. So that'll be Friday night, 6:00, IdahoSports.com. The playoffs kick off for the second year in a row, gentlemen, with an 8-man district rivalry matchup on Thursday night, 7:00. It's Lighthouse Christian at number 6 against Murtaugh at number 3. Coach, this is the second year in a row that the Devils and Lions have played in the regular season finale, and then have had to turn around and play less than a week later against each other in the first round of the playoffs. Now, last year, Murtaugh won the regular season matchup. Lighthouse came down and got the win in the playoffs. What happens this year?
Oh man, it depends who's still hungriest and who wants it more as the season finishes up here. I think Murtaugh really slapped them around in this last game and really wanted to make a statement on their senior night at home, and perhaps they'll want to make that same statement again. I don't think Mr. Jensen will allow that the Lighthouse Lions to be victorious again this year.
Yeah, well, the one big asterisk on the matchups last year was Junior Benitez was not involved. He was out with an injury. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's playing. And what did he do last week? Rushed for 302 yards and 7 touchdowns. Yeah, that'll get it done.
Yeah, he's dynamic, and he can do it in the passing game too. When Sawyer Young drops back to throw, he's a valid pass catching target. Not to mention a pretty good defensive back. He's a really good all around player. And when the way it was said to me that I thought was a good way to put it is when it's good Murtaugh, they've had a couple games where they have not played up to their capabilities this year, but when it's good Murtaugh, they're tough to beat. So if good Murtaugh gets off the bus on Thursday, it could be a long night for Lighthouse. Now, with that said, we also know that Lighthouse, when they're playing well, they're tough to beat. So this has the potential to just be one of those rock'em sock'em, rootin' tootin' Wild West shootouts, 58-52. On one side, you got Junior Benitez running for 300 yards. On the other side, you have Justice Schrader throwing for 400 yards. And, the fans leave tired. It has the potential to be that kind of game.
Yeah. Back to your analogy of stepping off the bus, I think Murtaugh's got that covered. It's a home game for them, so they don't even have to. They just walk to the field. They don't even have to get on the bus. That'll be a good time for sure. Coach Kirkland, I wanted to ask you about, so obviously last year, Lighthouse ended Murtaugh's season in Murtaugh in the opening round of the playoffs. I'm sure they've had the rematch, which happened last week, circled on the calendar all season long. Is that really a thing, or is that something we just narrate and make up in the media, the revenge factor? And we've had this game circled for a long time.
I think those do get circled and sometimes put on bulletin boards in locker rooms for additional motivation. It all depends. But back-to-back is interesting and difficult to play. We've had a lot of those over the year with North Gym and Rockland back in the day. And you kind of get a slow start after you beat them. You get a slow start that first half, the second game, for whatever reason, and then you get going. But I think it's still a good slugfest between two really good teams with talented athletes. So they'll both have to show up.
Yeah, definitely. I think I lean Murtaugh in this game just because we just saw them do it. And I think with Junior Benitez, that was an element that they just didn't have last year. And for Lighthouse, they still seem to go through these lulls a little bit, Will, where the offense just kind of shifts into a lower gear, and they're a high octane offense, kind of like good Murtaugh, bad Murtaugh, right? Good Lighthouse is good. But there's just been too many times this year where the offense has kind of stalled out.
Well, they struggled a little bit last week. They were a little bit flat. They weren't their best selves. Justice Schrader, the great senior quarterback, just did not have a particularly strong game. I'm sure he'd be the first one to admit it. So you talk about things that are circled. He's probably had this circled, ever since he went to bed last Friday night, saying, okay, I'm going to get my offense out there next week, and we're going to do what we know we can do. And if they do, like I say, it's going to be, you better not leave your seat to go get some popcorn. You might miss a couple of scores.
Yeah, it's funny. If this were like a big network and we were doing the promo for the game, we'd show a player from each team, and it would be, Justice Schrader and the Lions take on Junior Benitez and the Red Devils. Neither one of those guys played in the playoff game last year. Junior, of course, got hurt in like week 3 of the season, but Justice Schrader had gotten hurt against Murtaugh the week before and did not play. Case Van Leeuwen moved from receiver to quarterback and quarterbacked the Lions to the upset last year in the first round. So I'm really interested to see with both Junior and Justice playing in this game finally, what it'll look like. This is a game that you can tune into and listen to on IdahoSports.com Thursday night at 7:00 to kick off the postseason proper. Little Thursday night football should be a good one. Our final first round matchup to me is the most intriguing. The 5 and the 4. Potlatch finishes as the 5 seed. They'll travel to Valley, the 4 seed. Coach, Valley went over to Notice last week and won pretty convincingly over the Pirates, the champions from District 3.
Yeah, I am not shocked. That's a potent team, and loaded and just gaining momentum like crazy. Those kids are growing up really fast, and they have great coaches. Ayers has been there a while, and he knows how to build championship teams. He knows the right things to say, and just cutting those guys loose, and they're peaking at the right time. And certainly showed District 3 that number 3 and 4 in District 4 is still pretty potent and powerful on the road.
And Will, on the flip side of that, Potlatch is a team that started hot this year and then ran into a couple of buzzsaws in Logos and Kamei. Now we're about to find out, is Potlatch good and Kamei and Logos are great, or is Potlatch okay and Kamei and Logos are just better? I think this is an intriguing battle of White Pine League versus Snake River Conference, because 2 years in a row now, the Snake River Conference has gotten more teams into the playoffs than the White Pine. And so this is a good measuring stick to see where the two leagues actually stack up.
It is, and they're two teams that look pretty similar. If you had them switch jerseys, I don't know if you'd be able to tell the difference. You've got a really good dual threat quarterback on one side and Josh Hardy for Valley. You got a really good dual threat quarterback on the other side for Potlatch and Jack Clark. Both of them are coached really well. Brian Ayers in Valley, Ryan Ball up in Kamei, and you mentioned really the only two hiccups so far for Potlatch have been, two of the top 3 or 4 teams in the state statistically. And Potlatch, they're putting up over 50 points a game. They're explosive on offense. They have playmakers. It's a great matchup because it's one of those where I can make a really compelling argument for either team without even really trying. You hope that it's one of those games that lives up to it, what we're seeing on paper, because what we're seeing on paper is, back and forth, down to the last 2 minutes, and everybody in Hazleton, and that sidelines there are going to be crazy. Everybody's going to be into it, and you just know it's going to be an intense atmosphere, and you really want to see the game live up to it because the teams can put on one heck of a show for those fans.
Yeah, I think this, not to sound cliche, but I think this one comes down to turnovers, which team can take better care of the ball, because we both know Potlatch and Valley can both light it up and pile up the points, but who can take care of the ball the best, and maybe which team could steal a possession or two on defense, I think will be critical in this matchup. But these are all going to be really good first round games in the 1A D1 bracket. Before we moved on, gentlemen, there's basically 4 weeks between now and the end of the season. We have filled out exactly half of our all-name team. So I want to every week now present a name for consideration for the all-name team. And so then by, championship week, we've got a full 8-man roster on the all-name team. Does that sound like a good plan, guys?
Sure.
Okay. So to refresh, so far we've had 4 players make it. Razor Duke from Butte County, Crash Taylor from Castleford. We had Lucky Matt from Lakeside. And then our most recent selection of the team, Rocky Sauce from Notice. Now, those are all pretty good. I think it's going to be tougher to find those unique names as we go from here on out. So I want to hear from all the 8-man fans. If you've got a player you want to submit for the all-name team here between now and the end of the season, send it to Brandon at IdahoSports.com, and I'll put it before the committee, and we'll see. But I wanted to go with a player we're not going to be talking about because his team didn't make it to the postseason, but he's a fantastic player, and he had a great regular season finale, and I'm talking about Bass Myers from Clearwater Valley. He's had a great season. Clearwater Valley suffered through some injuries and didn't quite finish where they wanted to, but I wanted to give a shout out to Bass Myers for the all-name team. Coach, what do you think?
I think I could go with that. That sounds good to me. I might even have a carry name for you if you like it. Freshman kid, Madden Perks.
Oh, I love that. Yes. Oh,
big hair and everything. Cool kid.
That's awesome.
Hurts.
Madden
I can get with both those, especially Bass Myers and Kuski, where you've got the Clearwater River right there. I don't know if they have bass in that river or not, but it just fits. It fits.
Yeah, a great fishing town, and having a kid named Bass on your team. Yes. All right. So look at that. We got a bonus one. We got Madden Hertz from Cary, Bass Myers from Clearwater Valley. 2 spots left on the all-name team. I want your submissions. Send them to Brandon at IdahoSports.com, and we'll hand out those final 2 spots on the all-name team here over the final 4 weeks of the season. Okay, let's move to the 1A D2 bracket. We should mention too, the 1A D1 bracket, your district champions all got buys in the first round. That would be Butte County and Oakley and Notice and Logos. So they all get to enjoy the bye, rest up, and refresh. Okay, so here's the 1A D2 bracket, kind of the same. 4 of the 5 district champions got first round buys: Mullen St. Regis, Kendrick, Camas County, and Rockland. And now here are the matchups. We'll start at the top here, where Mackay, we talked about how they got in by 2 points, literally, into the playoffs. They will travel to Hagerman. Both of these teams finished in second place in their respective divisions this year, Coach. I would say that Mackay wants to keep the game somewhat low scoring, whereas Hagerman wants to get out and run a little bit.
Yeah, it's just a great opportunity, great privilege for Hagerman to be able to host. It's been quite a while since they've had a playoff game at their house, and hungry, and have a good team, a good solid run team. Mackay will have to hang in there and give punches when they can, and just hold on and maybe run that clock down to the very edge there. But Hagerman looks to be a strong contender in that one, and pretty hungry right now.
Yeah, I wanted to pick your brain on that too, Coach, because you're a good historian of the 8-man game, but it seems like it wasn't that long ago that Mackay and Hagerman were, some of the premier programs. They were always in the playoffs. They were always competing. And then they both kind of, as happens in the 8-man game, they kind of went into a lull, but they're back on the upswing. And so how exciting is it to see 2 historically good programs like Mackay and Hagerman back in the playoffs duking it out?
Yeah, I wonder if old Jack McKelly will show up, and Lonnie Funkhauser will be on the sideline chatting with each other, eating a hamburger, Paul, and enjoying the game from those 2 old programs. I think Hagerman's championship was in 2013 or 14 or so, and then they kind of went away for a while, and I remember last playing Mackay in 2011 or so. But it's pretty cool to have these guys matching up again. Some great history.
Yeah, Will, and the history a lot here too. Mackay, of course, has co-opted a couple of times over the past couple of years. They did the Lost Rivers thing with Butte County. They played with Chalice last year. It's great for Mackay to stand on their own and go, here's our team, and look what we did.
Yeah, and they've got really good athletes. I had coaches telling me back in week 3, week 4, don't just put Rockland and North Gem in. That Mackay team is going to have something to say about it before it's all said and done, because they've got some talent. And I think it's going to be important for them, against a good Hagerman team. Mackay can hit some home runs too with, the Bruley to Bruley connection in the passing game. I think it's going to be important for them to be able to control the ball a little bit, control the line of scrimmage, maybe run a little clock. And I'm not saying go 4 corners and stall, but you might want to try and limit Hagerman's possessions a little bit. And, if you can go on a good 8, 9, 10 play drive and take 3, 4, 5 minutes off the clock and get a touchdown, that's going to be a big thing for them, because defensively they've been okay. They've done some good things on defense, but stepping up a level in the playoffs, everything gets a little bit tougher. Everything gets a little bit tighter, and it's going to be interesting to see how these 2 teams respond to the lights being just a little bit brighter than they were last week.
Yeah, and they've got The Pirates have what I've dubbed the four horsemen of Hagerman. You talk about Wyatt Mavenkamp and Wyatt Huskavec and Kai Kendall and Martin Gonzalez, and all four of them all take turns, sharing the load, and it's made Hagerman really tough to game plan for opposing coaches. So good luck to both teams. I think I lean Hagerman here. They are the team at home, and they have more players available too than Mackey does. So I'll go Hagerman there. The winner of this game would play Mullins St. Regis. So either way, long trip north for the winner of this one. So we will wait and see. This game will be Friday night, 7:00 in Hagerman. Okay, another Thursday night game, gentlemen. Below it, Council, the district champions from District 3. They won the Long Pin Conference. They will play Dietrich, the number 3 seed out of District 4. This game will be Thursday night in Council, 6:00. This is a game that you can watch. That's right, watch on IdahoSports.com. So what a great way to kick off the postseason. Coach, Dietrich is not your typical 3 seed out of District 4, though. I think we've said all year District 4 is probably, in terms of teams at the top, the best conference in the league. And so Dietrich's kind of a dangerous third-place team.
They are, and it is playoff time, and that they will go over there, stepping up their game, and bring their very best. Coach Estelle, they are on the road, facing a great Council team, but I think Dietrich will represent and give everything that they got, and show that double pride, and do their best to advance to one more round.
And Will, we talked about Dietrich and the talent that they bring, and unfortunately sometimes Lady Luck on the bracket can be cruel, because Dietrich is a team, I think, if they were slotted somewhere else, maybe has a better chance of getting on a deep run. But with Council in the way right away out of the gates, that'll be a tough matchup.
Oh, it'll definitely be a tough matchup, and it's one that I like. When I saw that one come out, I was really interested to see, because, well, 2 reasons. Number one, see how Dietrich bounces back after getting it taken to him pretty good last week by Camas County in basically a de facto conference championship game. How do they bounce back? But the other thing I'm really intrigued with when it comes to Council, this is a team that's 6-3. They went 5-0 in the long pin. When they went outside of long pin play, they got kicked in the shins a couple of times pretty good. So, how do they respond? By, seeing Dietrich instead of a long pin team where they had tremendous success this year. Now, they played some really tough teams. When you're talking about their 3 losses are Kendrick, Kamei, and Butte County. So I don't know that it's really fair to say, obviously, they stink outside of the long pin. I think most of the state of Idaho would go 0-3 against those 3 teams. But how are they able to step up when it really matters here with a good opponent? And weather could be a factor tomorrow night up in Council when they play this game.
Yeah, it seems like weather's always a problem in Council. It was last year in the quarterfinals against Castleford, of course. And so, Coach, I wanted to get your opinion on this as well. Logan Green, who was helping fill in last week, has seen Council a couple of times with his own eyes. He's seen Camas County with his own eyes, and he has flat out told me that, hey, I think Council beats Camas. I've seen both teams with my own eyes. I'm wondering what you think of. I know they're not going to probably end up facing off, but Council versus Camas in terms of everybody says Kendrick is the best team. And then depending on who you ask, a lot of people say Camas might be number 2, or some people say Council.
I think Council's going to have to prove it in this game to convince me that they can beat Camas by blowing Dietrich out, if that's possible. But I think Dietrich's going to have some quick shots to announce and give right away in that first half to put points on the board. But I'm beginning to respect Council more and more as the season has gone along, and especially after that the beating they put on Garden Valley the other week. That was very impressive, and making a statement that they want to represent District 3 as 3A, the number 1 seed there, and continue to push their way through here. But I think they got to beat Dietrich handily for me to be convinced that they can beat Camas County, because Camas is rough. Those guys are dudes.
And of course, the winner of this game does not get Camas County; they get Kendrick. So, hey, if you're going to beat Camas County, you're going to have to beat Kendrick too at some point. So, good luck to both Council and Dietrich. This is Thursday night on IdahoSports.com, 6:00 kickoff. That is 6:00 Mountain Time. All right. Speaking of Camas County, they get a first round bye. They will await the winner of Clark Fork and Garden Valley. Gentlemen, this is the game that I will be at on Friday night. I had such a great time in Clark Fork last week. I'm headed back up to Wampus Cat Country, gentlemen. As long as they'll have me, of course, comments about the game being over notwithstanding. This is an interesting matchup to me. Clark Fork, of course, second place from District 1. Garden Valley kind of stubs their toe a little bit, loses to Tri-Valley. Now, the final score of that game was a little deceptive, I feel like. When you look at the final score, you see Tri-Valley last week beats Garden Valley by a final of 32-20. So it's a 2-score win, Coach, but a touchdown came for Tri-Valley with about 30 seconds to play in the first half of action, and then they scored again with about 10 seconds remaining in the game. So those 2 scores at the end of both halves really was the difference. And honestly, if I'm looking at the draw, Tri-Valley, for their win, is rewarded with a home game against Lewis County. Garden Valley, for their loss, has to travel, and they have to travel a long ways, but I think I'd rather take my chances with Clark Fork than Lewis County, only because we've already seen Lewis County push Tri-Valley to the brink. So to me, Garden Valley got a pretty decent matchup in terms of having to go on the road and play somewhere.
I think I agree with that. To squeak out the win like Clark Fork did says a lot about their program and some good things on their side that's going to help them out. Sometimes that luck does fall in your favor, and you pick up a team where it's a good matchup. It's a game where you feel like you can probably get the win out of it, even though it's clear up on the road. But however, I'm impressed with Clark Fork's play, and Garden Valley is going to have to be on their game and limit the turnovers and play a clean game up there on the road. So we'll see what happens.
And that's kind of been the bugaboo for Garden Valley this year, Will, is sometimes they do turn the ball over and kind of get into these droughts offensively, as it were.
Yeah, interested to see what the weather is going to be like up there. I mean, you're practically in Canada up there at Clark Fork. You're way up north, and it can get a little bit dicey up there in that region as the fall trends towards winter. And the one big advantage that I see that Garden Valley would have over Clark Fork is you have Tacoma Kelly, and you have Caden Zimmer, and you have Max Yearsley, and you have Trevor Korn, and they've got a lot of athletes. But if the game is a slog, if it's, if the field conditions are not great and it's just get behind your pads and push the pile forward, and Trevor Korn's carrying the ball 40 times for 200 yards, okay, that takes away some of Garden Valley's natural advantage. Though, I mean, they're certainly no strangers to playing in iffy weather themselves in Garden Valley. It's not like it's always 80 and sunny there. But I think that if the weather conditions are not good, that levels the playing field quite a bit for Clark Fork, because most of the year, you've said it yourself, they like to play a little bit more of a deliberate pace. They want to run the ball, whether San Roman's able to be back or not. That's something they want to do. And if they can shorten the game, they can absolutely steal a win.
That's going to be the key. I think that's where it all hinges, is up front. Can Clark Fork's offensive line, Seth Caven and this really good sophomore center, Owen Howard, can they neutralize what I think are probably the best pair of defensive linemen, at least in 1AD2, in Trevor Korn and Trustin Brown? Those guys are legit. I've seen them play with my own eyes twice last year. And I know that they are tough to run the ball against, and even tougher when you drop back to pass. So if Clark Fork can neutralize those guys, I think, like you said, the game plan is shorten the clock, keep Tacoma Kelly off the field on offense, and try to, as you said, steal a win there. But I do think this is a good spot for Garden Valley going on the road. And after saying that, I'm sure I'll never be allowed back in Clark Fork again, ever.
Tell them I'm the one who said it. Blame me.
That'll be Friday night, 7 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Mountain for all the Garden Valley fans on IdahoSports.com. And our final matchup is Tri-Valley and Lewis County. Winner of this will play Rockland. I mean, this is the best matchup. I think you can go 5A all the way down to 1A D2, Coach. The way this game ended just 2 weeks ago, where Tri-Valley walked it off with a touchdown as time expired to win 62-56. This to me is the game. This is the most exciting first round matchup.
Yeah, it's these games that keep having repeat games here against each other are a lot of fun and very exciting. And you love to see that in the bracket. And then hopefully we get to hear or watch that one as well. It should be another great shootout to see who makes the most adjustments or stays the same, stays the course, and just forces their own will.
Will, what do you think happens in the rematch? Just we talk about it's hard to beat the same team twice in 1 year, but this one was such a coin flip where it was ended on the last play. It's hard to say if anybody really gleaned anything or had momentum from that first matchup.
No, I mean, because they were more or less punch for punch the whole way through. I think that Gage Warren was not 100% for Tri-Valley in that first meeting. If he's in a better spot, and he played and he was fine, but he clearly wasn't as explosive as we know he can be. If he's able to be more of a factor in this game health-wise, that's a bit of a tilt in the favor for Tri-Valley, not to mention the fact that the game is in Cambridge once again. So Lewis County is going to have to make that trip down. But Lewis County, you take out about a 3-week stretch early in the year where they had some players out with injury. They've been good. Like, they've been a legitimately good football team, and nobody's really figured out, the direct snap to Gage Crow is 1A D2's version of the Philadelphia Eagles tush push. Nobody's really figured out how to stymie that yet. And until they do, if I'm Monty Madrell, I'm just going to be like, okay, here's our play. Snap it to Gage and go block somebody, and he'll just run. On one, ready, break. They've got some other players who can do some things. The player who I think can really help Lewis County's can really help their cause quite a bit with a big game is Nick Kirkland, senior two-way lineman, big, strong kid. And if he's able to wreak some havoc in the trenches, particularly defensively, where it's a little bit tougher for Tri-Valley to get outside, then that could be a big, big boost to Lewis County's chance to get a win.
Last team with the ball wins. I mean, that's how it went the first time. We'll see how the rematch goes. This will be a fun one in Cambridge on Friday night at 7 o'clock. And guys, I will throw in a disclaimer here. When it comes to the postseason, broadcasting plans can change on a dime, depending on what the other broadcast entity that broadcasts postseason games decides to do. So what I've said we're covering may change. The surefire way to be sure is to click on the game streams tab on the homepage at IdahoSports.com, and that'll have all of your up-to-date info. And of course, you'll want to check back at IdahoSports.com for all the updated scores and brackets and schedules all weekend long as well. But we've arrived, gentlemen. It is the postseason. Coach, you got any postseason traditions you like to do?
Win?
I have to think for a minute on that. I'm not sure. I usually don't sleep.
I think that's what's that?
I usually don't sleep at all, but I'm not interested in that this year, so I'll just watch.
That sounds good. I think I asked you the same question at the start of the year. Do you have any start of season traditions? You said the same thing. No sleep. So yeah, you'll be well rested for sure. Will, what are you going to be doing for the first round of the playoffs? You just going to be hunkered in, locked into IdahoSports.com?
That's the plan at this moment. That's the plan. The weather not being super great is a factor. There aren't that many games around here. I live in the west end of the Boise Valley. So I basically Council and Tri-Valley are my two options. So maybe we try and take in one of those, but that's a couple hour drive, hour and a half, 2 hour drive. So we'll see. Having the ability to listen to some other games and see some other games, and doing it inside, with a heater. That sounds pretty appealing.
Yeah, you can't beat that. So it's going to be a great weekend of postseason football. Good luck to all of the teams that are competing here in the opening round of the playoffs. And It all starts on Thursday night when Council hosts Dietrich and Murtaugh hosts Lighthouse Christian. And then all the rest is on Friday, but it should be a good time. So we'll be back again next week to talk about the first round and get you ready for the quarterfinals as well. So for Coach Lane Kirkland and Will Henneke, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in to the Idaho 8-Man Prepcast, everybody, on IdahoSports.com.